Right. I wanted to talk about The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, which I've just finished. And what a book. I mean, firstly, I loved it. And everything about it, I mean, it was an epic. It was long and funny and tragic. It really had everything. I mean, it had moments where your heart sinks and then things that make you laugh as well. But I really loved it. Um, I've got some notes here, but it's not an essay. So expect a disjointed view of the book, but I'm just desperate to talk about it because it was so good. And I hope that I can highlight a few things that might make you think further about the book. It will contain spoilers, so uh, yeah, I hope you read and loved the book like I did. So, really, I mean, the whole book is like a storm building. So, it's referred to literally as well, especially with the huge storm at the end and the weather and the huge downpours. It was really atmospheric. But the whole thing is just building and building the whole way. Um, and just how it gets punchier and punchier towards the end. And not just with things like the length of the sections and it's switching between characters quicker, but there's a kind of sense of inevitability about it. Yeah, it's incredible how well it was done. I mean, other things that were done really well that I don't see mentioned immediately in reviews and in these kind of discussions online. One is specifically the sequence with Rose when she was first introduced in Imelda's backstory, where some ne'er-do-wells came to her house, and Rose just came in and started making a cup of tea. I mean, that whole thing was just brilliant, and how that tied into the story of the black dog, or the continuation of that, as it that black dog with eyes like saucers kept appearing in the book as this symbol for there's something bad about to happen. But how that was where it was introduced, I thought was magnificent, because it was. I mean, the whole book did this really well. It wasn't on the nose and blunt. Everything kind of seeped under your skin, and then you realise further through a different lane what it means. And yeah, I thought that was fantastic. I mentioned it was laugh out loud funny. I mean, the funniest thing that I saw in the book was the kid that said that PJ owes him money because of what his dad did at the garage. He talked about his ears. Did he just call him ears? Maybe. It was mentioned a few times, and that is, in PJ's section, and then later on in Imelda's section, the mother, when she was just walking through town, I think, and she mentioned that she saw a woman with very large ears, and you kind of twig because the ears reference comes a few times earlier in PJ's story. But she mentioned the mum of this kid's got big ears, the father has, and then just the whole execution of, and they've got a son as well, PJ's friend. And bearing in mind this is after he's beaten him up really badly and threatened to kill him with a hammer. PJ's friend, head like a hang glider. It was just, it was brilliant, and the whole book does that. In the like, that's one line. There are these tiny throwaway references that appear, and sometimes they appear before the fact, where there'll be a little piece, and if you're reading it attentively and giving it the attention it deserves, then later on, when you reach another character section, it's explained in so much detail. So specifically, for example, when Dickie's driving Cass somewhere at some point, his daughter, and a police car stops them, and after the police car drives away, the father's just sat there in silence for minutes, kind of face white, knuckles white, kind of gripping onto the steering wheel, and then just carries on like nothing happened. And Cass just thinks it's a bit weird. And obviously, as the reader of the story, you know there's more to this. And then later on, when you get to Dickie's story, and you realise that the trauma that he has from his first experience with the policeman, or the man who turned out to be a policeman, it makes sense. I mean, it works the other way as well, in that there are these huge life-changing events for characters that are then referred to further forward in the story by another character, but as a throwaway line because they don't realise the significance of it. And then we as the reader, it's just, it's fantastic the way that that's done. Let me look at my notes. I mean, I don't know which hits harder out of those two. The little lines that come before or the little lines that come after the true explanation of what happened. For me, it was probably before, because you feel kind of rewarded for having remembered that little detail. So I actually checked how to pronounce the name of the dodgy mechanic, the villain of the story, which I believe is Richard. But reading it, he was, Ryszard, everything. So I think it's Richard, like a kind of Polish Richard. But for me, he was the villain of the story. I mean, obviously, he wasn't exactly a stand-up gent, but like a true villain. And it was brilliant as well, especially how he was introduced through Cass and Elaine, and how he's impacted everyone in the story. Of really everybody. He had some kind of run-in and some kind of pull on them, of course. I think for me that was one of the main things about this story, is that the story is about people twisting people away from their true selves. And he especially does it. I mean, when he first has that encounter with it, if we start kind of chronologically with the book, when he meets Cass and Elaine, and he's trying to kind of urge them into a threesome, or he's introducing drugs and things, and pulling Cass away, really. I mean, I know Elaine's doing the same thing in that she's a kind of villain in her own sense, although her impact's a little bit more limited to Cass. But Richard there pulls Cass at first, and then even PJ. I believe it's Richard who he sees when he's in the woods looking at the half-finished house where Augustina's staying, and terrifies him. He flees because he catches him, and again that's the more kind of visceral kind of the villain. And then of course with Imelda, he has that kind of magnetism. I think the only other person that was described as that magnetic was Frank, her former boyfriend and Dickie's brother, because he is described as having that raw likability and getting on with everyone and making everyone feel like they're the centre of the room and the only person there. And Richard is like a dark version of that. He has those beautiful looks, and he kind of draws her in, and he kind of pulls her away from the illusion that she's been living with Dickie, and she said she can't help herself. She doesn't like him, and she doesn't like what he's doing. But yeah, I believe that's probably the start of her leaning towards the affair that never happened with Big Mike. I think he pulled her away from herself there. And then, of course, Dickie, and how he kind of pulled him into his true self, didn't he? But not in a very good way at all. And yeah, that whole thing was so well done as well. But he pulled everyone, twisted them away from their comfort zone. I mean, I said the whole book is about that. I think it expands far more to just than just Richard. A couple of people. I mean, when you look at Cass, I mean, her bit was all brilliant as well. I mean, it's amazing how the author can capture this 18-year-old girl and what life would be like. I mean, as far as I can imagine what it would be like myself as someone who's not an 18-year-old girl. But not just Elaine pulling Cass into this life of that doesn't really suit her, of going out drinking and things, and but there are other influences as well. So I almost forgot until I was thinking back about this, but Cass had a friend when Elaine first started going out and almost abandoning Cass a little bit. Cass made friends with someone at school who was studious and more of a fit to, I think, what I consider Cass's true self to be. And then at the other end of the book, there's the German girl with the blue hair, who's very similar in a way, in that she's also more true to Cass's nature. And Cass kind of, at first she's disgusted Elaine, and she's the kind of girl that Elaine wouldn't like. And and she pushes her away. There's a bit of a push-pull thing there, but in turn I think this girl is bringing Cass to who she's supposed to be. And especially with the bus journey back from Dublin right at the end with PJ, when she gets the message about where this girl's been, and PJ recommends, says, oh, you should recommend this other place, and she could take her there. And I feel like that's Cass kind of ascending and becoming who she really is. And yeah, I mean, to talk about the whole Richard as an anti-Frank kind of thing, I really do think he is the dark version of Frank, because Frank left that big hole in everyone's life that twisted everyone off course, and it led to all of the events happening. But I think Richard, obviously was a catalyst for it all spiraling out of control, but he had those qualities that Frank had, but all twisted, all in the negative way. I mean, they were both selfish to some extent. Obviously, we got a lot less character development on our mechanic there than our Frank, but wow, I mean, the whole thing is just like a perfect puzzle fitting together, all the characters and everything. I understand it spent, Paul Murray spent 5-6 years writing it, longhand, but it's just, just amazing how well put together it is. I mean, one thing that I wanted to think about was what the life would have been if Frank had been there, because the story essentially, again for me, is the story of Frank not being there. So obviously how it's so brilliantly done with Imelda, and how you view her, the mother, as someone who's just a kind of selfish, materialistic woman, annoying, words coming at you like a blizzard, was it, individually peppered by flakes of snow, all the random little words that she gives you. That was only in the first couple of pages, but just memorable writing. But yeah, obviously the lack of Frank broke her. She was completely heartbroken. If he didn't have his accident, then her fairy tale would have continued. Obviously Dickie then would stay in Dublin. Probably, would his confidence grow with Willie? I mean, things turned out well for Willie, as we see kind of further on in the story. And would Dickie been a part of that? He would have been at his side, coming out together and flourishing together. And then it's a little bit more theoretical now. But Cass and PJ, assuming that they would still exist and that Frank would be their father, you'd assume then that Cass would be happier. I mean, one of her main tensions is her tension with her mother. Would Imelda have had less resentment for Cass with her little elbows jabbing her on the way out when she was born, which is, again, so memorable. And I mean, what a line. I think a chapter ended on that as well. And it just showed her relationship so clearly. I mean, how she felt of her and the damage that was done in losing Frank and the resentment she had for Dickie. But if Frank was Cass's dad, then Imelda might not have had that resentment, and then she could have provided that love, and she would have turned out potentially differently. PJ would he no longer have been compared to the uncle who wasn't there. It was that's why I was thinking of it in terms of Frank not being there. And then again, if you continue the story, how would Frank have dealt with Richard? You think he's the kind of guy you think, he wouldn't dare. Victor wouldn't be involved in the family. I've not mentioned Victor kind of twisting, again with that theme of characters twisting each other in directions. The supporting characters do it so well. But yeah, Victor, who's helping renovate the bunker and build the prepper kind of lifestyle for Dickie. He's chalk and cheese with Frank, so you can't imagine that he would have been a part of their lives so much. I mean, it's hard to deal with it in that respect when you hear like that Frank got on with everyone and made everyone feel like they were, the centre. So maybe he would have gone. But I can't imagine him getting pulled into that kind of life, especially with the ambitions he had. Right, well, that's my thoughts on the story, really. I mean, you don't have to guess that I would give it 5 stars, and that, if I was rating it, and that I absolutely loved it. what a fantastic book. If you have any thoughts on anything I've said, then I'd love to hear them. It's one of those books that I'll keep coming back to and comparing everything that I read, and I'll definitely read it again. So read it if you haven't. I've gone through I've not spoiled the huge ending, of course. If you have any thoughts about that or would like a discussion, I love talking about the book, so we'll go into that in future.